Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you've been well. So today, as you can tell by the video title, we're talking about food. So I'm continuing my Prepping 101 series where I basically take a preparedness topic and kind of give a 101 type course where I try not to go too deep. I try not to get too into the weeds, but I do give you a broad view of that topic with a lot of, I have my table in this room filled with kind of real world things that I do myself that I can, share with you guys. I also took a bunch of notes, not like informational notes, but just topics that I want to try to remember to touch on. Looking at the topics I want to touch on, this video is going to be pretty long. So settle in. You can tell by the timestamp how long the video is. I don't know right now. I haven't filmed it yet, but my guess is it's going to be long. This is going to be largely talking. I'm going to show some examples here and there, but it's going to be more of a podcast style video. So feel free to put on some headphones and do some mindless tasks while you listen. Share it with friends and family. I appreciate it. You guys are getting sick of hearing it, but I don't know. Things are weird on YouTube, and I don't know if it's because I'm doing weird stuff with Prepping 101 and they don't like that. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I appreciate you watching, thumbs up, commenting, letting me know what you'd like to see in the Prepping 101 series or videos in general, and sharing the videos with friends. Just hit that little share button, get subscribed, hit that notification bell, all the YouTube things. I'll put links down below to everything. Some of those will be affiliate links, so appreciate you using those. So when it comes to preparedness, there's a lot of different aspects of preparedness, and depending on who you talk to, what they're into, their interests, they'll tell you the most important thing is X, Y, or Z. If you talk to a ham radio nerd, they'll say comms. Comms are the most important. Without comms, you will die. You need to know intel is life. Or you talk to a gun. Without guns, if I don't have my AR-15, someone could kill me. I will be dead then. Guns are the most important thing. Or you talk to somebody that has a really dialed bug out. If you don't have a bug out bag, you're not ready to go. If you don't have a 72-hour pack, you're gonna die. But I think we can all agree that probably food and water as well. Water is a little easier to come by than food. Probably food is literally the most important thing because without it, you will die. You have to eat. Your body needs fuel to continue going. So food to me is the most important, if not the up there in the top one or two most important things that you should prep. And then you say, why should I prep? This video is not really about why should I prep, but a few examples: natural disasters that the grocery store, you're either not going to be able to get there, it's going to be shut down, they're going to be out of food, whatever. Natural disaster, you need some food on hand. Maybe not a year's supply of food, but some food. Or AI apocalypse, or China hacks our infrastructure, or maybe you lose your job and you don't have income coming in, but at least you can ride out some of those expenses with the food that you have prepared. So there's a lot of real world practical reasons to prepare food. We're gonna get into it. All right, before we get too deep into the weeds, I wanna thank a related to this video sponsor, AG1. So they've been sponsoring some videos on the channel for a while. Huge shout out to them. Love them and their support of the channel. So I appreciate that. But in your food preparedness thing, I'll talk more about this later. You need some nutritional elements, and AG1 is actually a great source for that. It's just an effortless daily habit to get that foundational nutrition into your life and kind of kickstart your day. So I usually just speak from the heart because I love it. I'm gonna be reading off some stuff here because they just recently published some new research studies that they participated in, which these are up on their website if you wanna dig into them more, because a lot of people are like, what is the point of any of that stuff? Does it even work? Does it? Or are you just feeling it? Anyway, some research studies just released and some things that I thought were actually very interesting. So again, dig into this yourself, but 97% of participants felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. 80% of participants noticed less gas and bloating after 30 days. 94% of participants noticed fewer cravings after 90 days. 97% of participants felt digestion improved after 90 days of drinking AG1. There's a bunch of stuff on here in the research studies. Again, if you're interested in AG1, I implore you to go check it out yourself, but interesting. Now, I've been drinking AG1 for a while now myself and love it. And some reasons that I like it is it's just kind of, I've talked about this, it's kind of helped my health journey in general. And it's just an easy thing to do every day. And it kind of just makes me more cognizant about my health. So I just drink this, and it in itself has a bunch of health. It has stuff from my gut health and focus and energy and immune defense, nutrients obviously, but it also just kind of helps me think about being more healthy in general. If you've ever been interested in trying out AG1, you want to work it into your food storage preparations as an extra source of nutrients, then you can use this link, drinkag1.com/LLOD, or scan a QR code that I'm throwing up on the screen somewhere, I think, and they'll throw in 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 for you. A year's supply. A year's supply. Not bad. Anyway, appreciate the support from AG1. Check them out if you're interested. Again, I thought those research studies were very cool that they published, and yeah. And just so you know, sponsorship over, just so you know, I usually talk longer. I don't need to talk that long about AG1, but there's just a lot to talk about, and I enjoy them. And yeah. So, moving on to food and back to my notes here. So, when you start your food preparedness journey, there's a lot of things to consider. There's how long should I be storing food for? Like, what is a good number of days to get to? There's no real answer here. Preppers will throw out numbers at you for reasons, or the CDC or whoever will tell you. You want as much as you can have, though, generally. There's some kind of common 72 hours of food. That should be a no-brainer. You should at least always have food on time for 72 hours. Some people like to say a month worth of food. That is very good as well. A month of food is a lot of food. If you think about what you eat in a month, that's a lot of food to have on hand that won't go bad. And kind of the prepper dream is to get to a year. Some people maybe want infinite, but to get to a year. Now, a year's worth of food, that's a lot of food. You need to have a place to store it. You need to be able to store it. You need to be able to buy it. So it's kind of a work up to there. So don't take the takeaway of this video like, oh, if I don't have a year's supply of food, then screw it. Because the reason is every little bit helps. And I'm gonna show you an approach to kind of check a bunch of boxes. Some of it is making your own food, growing your own food, chickens, all that stuff we'll talk about. Some is just getting more of what you naturally are gonna eat, a little more than you would normally have on hand. So there's a big approach, and then we're gonna get into kind of long-term. I actually just recently, Harvest Right sent me out a freeze dryer. I have a link. If you want a freeze dryer, use my affiliate link. That's how I make money. So appreciate it. Get your own freeze dryer and make your own super long-term storage food. We're gonna cover all that in this video. So when it comes to nutrients, some people say, I got a bunch of rice in the pantry, I am good to go. And that is partially true. There's a lot of people in the world that are living off almost an exclusive rice diet. Rice and beans, even better. You have a little bit more nutrients. Rice and beans comes together to form a perfect protein. Rice and beans, you could kind of live off of just rice, just beans. Together, you can kind of live off of indefinitely. So if you just have rice, I would try to get a little more. And if you just have rice and beans, I'd still try to get a little more, because your body does better. And you're happier with more variety, but your body does better with more nutrients than just you're gonna get out of rice and beans. So kind of rice and beans are great, and that's what a lot of people will tell you. And that is primarily what I store myself, rice, beans, and actually oats, which we'll get into later, but try to get more. And then some other things, I'm I'm just rattling off some like generic stuff that I got to get out of the way before we get into the meat and potatoes. Your family's going to be different. So your dietary restrictions are going to be different. Maybe your food allergies are going to be different. And then the profile of people that you're trying to feed and trying to support. Are you a guy living by yourself? That's going to be different than if you have a family of different areas. Do you have a newborn? Do you need to stockpile? Maybe you're not breastfeeding. You need to stockpile a year's supply of formula, and then you need to think about milk requirements outside of human milk, maybe cow's milk. There's a lot to consider. If you have animals, you need to prep food for them as well. Yes, again, I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds of like, this is what you need to prepare for your dog. This is what you need for a 2-year-old. This is what you need for somebody who is diabetic. There's a lot of variables, so think about those in your food preps, and then we're going to get to the kind of the generals. So one of my favorite approaches, one of the most practical, the most realistic, something that can apply to everyone. Literally everyone can do this, and it won't affect their budget too much, and it won't be that impractical, and it won't be frowned upon, and I think everyone can get on board with this method. Things that you eat regularly, just get a little more of. Things that are shelf stable. You know, you don't want to get a ton of tomatoes that are going to go bad or whatever, but things that are shelf stable that you eat regularly, buy more of. Now, I'm finding as I kind of get older, we're trying to eat healthier. We're trying to eat less processed foods. It's harder to store more of this type of food when you're trying to eat more healthy, I guess. We're not perfect. We're not anywhere near perfect. I eat tons of processed food stills, but we're trying to be better. So more of our food sources are not processed. So they're not the processing of the food. The preservatives obviously will help things be more shelf stable. So some of this becomes more difficult the healthier you try to eat. But I'm going to throw some examples at you before you get on me. Oh, you shouldn't eat that. That was kind of the hey, I don't eat this that much, but a lot of people, I understand a lot of people do. So things like, I love ramen still. So if you eat ramen and say you go to the grocery store every week and you buy enough, say you eat ramen 3 times a week, I have no idea. So you go and you buy 3 ramen packets. You should instead buy more. I don't know how many more, buy 12. You get I think a price break at 12. So then with ramen as an example, you cycle it out. So your oldest stuff moves to the front, your newest stuff you put in the back, and then you just eat it. So rather than having 3 ramens on yourself, maybe you have 12, or maybe you have 24, or whatever. And as you get the new stuff, you always kind of have like, instead of 3, 24 is the new 3. So as you get down to whatever, 12, you buy another 12, and then you keep cycling it out. That's just an example with ramen, but some other items, maybe we make real mashed potatoes, but we have some of these as well. If we don't have potatoes on hand, we're like, oh, this it just sounds good. Things like this that just store relatively well. Mac and cheese. Now, we've been trying to eat less hamburger helper, but hamburger helper. Or like I said earlier, rice and beans, but this has got seasoning and everything, and you just add a protein. Or I'm not Hawaiian, but I lived in Hawaii for a while. I identify as Hawaiian. Spam, baby. Spam. You can't make a survival food video without talking about spam. I still love spam. It's one of the worst things for you, I'm sure, but I still love it. So things that you'll eat regularly, especially more shelf-stable things, pack away more of. Now, there are things that maybe you eat regularly, like honey. Honey has an indefinite shelf life. If stored properly, honey can kind of last forever. It may crystallize it. You put this in a pot of boiling water to basically remelt it down, melt all those crystals. It returns back to a liquid form. Honey. I have lots of honey. Now make sure you're getting honey where ingredients are honey, not like a honey product that's made from other stuff. Honey, pure honey, has an indefinite shelf life. So that's another thing to store more of, especially if you're using more of it and you normally only have 1 little jar of honey. Instead, have a handful of jars of honey. I try to get protein from eggs and meat and natural food sources, but I still consume a lot of protein powder. Protein powder has a pretty long shelf life. You're gonna need protein in your food storage plan. And this is, well, I don't feel like wasting a ton of time trying to find the shelf life or the expiration date on this. Now, I've had this one stored for a while. It expires in 2025, July of 2025. So I think a lot of protein powder has a 2-year shelf life. So if you go through a thing of protein every month and it has a 2-year shelf life, technically you could have a 2-year supply of protein that you know you're going to use and won't go bad, and you're not throwing money away on something that you're going to put away and store for 30 years until you die and maybe pass down to your kids. This is stuff that you're going to use. Now, I have no affiliation with this brand particularly, but most protein powders will have a nice long shelf life. So rather than getting one every month, maybe you work up, again, budgetary restrictions aside, you work up to where you can have 12 on the shelf. You can have a year's supply of protein powder, like full bore protein powder, full 1-day serving protein powder, a year's supply of that on the shelf, and you're not wasting any of it because you're gonna use it. That is the best way to prepare food. So any kinds of food sources, you just look at what you're eating regularly that won't go bad, and you're saying, well, will I use this in time? Can I store enough and cycle it in? And maybe I still do, once I have 12 on hand, I'm still buying one every month like I was before, but now that just goes in the back of the 12 or whatever that is. So just think about food preparation. That's the best way to start preparing food because there's zero waste, and you kind of can ramp up to having a good supply of food that you like, that does well with your body, that you can digest, and that you can store. So do that. Now, as we're talking about shelf life, again, this video is very multifaceted. Shelf life is gonna be different based on food type. Some foods, your rices, your beans, your oats, they're gonna just have a long shelf life by their very nature, how they are. They're dried and they just last a long time. Other food sources, fats especially, have a very short shelf life. So it's harder to do long-term storage of like fats. So when you think about long-term food storage, you gotta think of how you can get fat from other sources, whether that's growing your own food or harvesting this or having animals that you can eat, pigs, whatever, that you're raising. Eggs have good fat in them as well, so chickens. So food storage, you gotta think about what has long shelf life, what doesn't have long shelf life, and if I'm prepping for long term, which not everyone is, sometimes people are just prepping for that short term natural disaster, which is fine, then you do got to think about that stuff because you really got to rotate that stuff in, the fats. And then things that will affect shelf life for everything across the board are really like heat, light, oxygen, and moisture. Those are kind of the main things. So we'll talk later about Mylar bags, proper food storage. But if you're trying to kind of think about this right now, where should I store my food? I'm gonna get into this mindset of having more food on hand. Do I store that in my pantry or here or there? Freezer is great if you have freezer space, obviously. Cold, dark, that's gonna last a long time. But if you have a basement is a great place to store food, especially in a closet in a basement, something that's gonna be a little more temperature controlled. You don't wanna store stuff out under your house if it's freezing and thawing and freezing. That's actually bad. So the more constant the temperature, in a perfect world, it'd be stored in a place that's 55 degrees all year round. Basements come closer to that, and they don't have as much fluctuation as storing it in your attic, for instance. So if you're gonna store long-term food, try to store it somewhere, wherever in your house that you have access to an available room that will be more temperature stable, ideally out of the light, ideally the lower temperatures. So again, just kind of running through topics here. Storing food is great. That's kind of the primary focus of this video. I'm gonna touch on growing your own food. Gardening is very popular everywhere. In America, all around the world, gardening, just raise garden beds or whatever. You have a garden, you plant potatoes in the ground, whatever. That is great. That's great because you know where your food comes from. You know what's going into your food. You kind of control what you're eating, and great for preparedness. A lot of food items, a lot of stuff that you're growing in your garden, you can harvest the seeds from that, and then you can reuse those seeds next year. This doesn't work for everything. There are certain seed types, again, not getting too into the weeds, but get into the practice of, if you're a gardener, actually using the seeds that you harvest from your own plants and using those to start seeds the next year, rather than going out and buying the little $1 packets from the grocery store or whatever every year. Try and learn, if you can, actually test yourself and continue indefinitely growing your own food from the food you grew the season before. I know a lot of people just buy seeds, but if you can grow from your own seeds, at least you kind of can gauge through the years, oh, my tomatoes, I couldn't grow them from the seeds I had last year, so that is something I need to figure out. Maybe there's a certain strain or a certain type of seed that will work better for that. So growing your own food, that is great. This is going to be dependent on where you live. If you live in a tropical environment, I wish I lived in a tropical environment. There are so many fruit trees that you can just throw in the ground in Hawaii or wherever, Florida, stuff like that. And you can have like an abundant every year after year after year, no thinking. Maybe you prune them once in a while. Fruit, much harder in Colorado. There are certain apples and peaches and plums and all the cherries and I think some grapes. And so there are things that you can grow in different climate zones, but I live in a notoriously difficult climate zone to have that. But I am myself, we do some gardening. I am working on getting fruit trees planted that will just be, essentially perennials, come back year after year after year, or just live, go dormant, come back in the spring, blossom, grow fruit. So in addition to gardening, if you can plant fruit trees, especially depending on where you live, a variety of them to get a little deeper. Some of them aren't self-pollinating. You may need other species. Growing your own trees, that is my fall I was gonna try it for the spring. Kind of, you wanna plant trees in spring and fall. So if you wanna get on board, fall, you probably missed the spring window, but fall is a good time to plant trees. So I'm gonna be working, I had a failed orchard attempt years ago. I'm gonna try better this time. Fruit trees, so grow your own fruit trees or berry bushes. A lot of berry bushes are perennials. You plant them one time, they'll just keep coming back. Keep coming back. Strawberries, things like that. So think about your food, growing your own food, and a lot of people just love it as a hobby. Healthy hobby, preparedness. I talk a lot about it. When you can combine a hobby with a preparedness type thing, that is the absolute best way to do it. Then you can also grow animal food as well. Chickens, rabbits, cows, pig, whatever. What kind of homestead you want to make, that is up to you. I am relatively light on it. I've been doing chickens and primarily just for eggs. I usually don't. Meat birds are a lot more work, and technically I have egg laying chickens. There are different breeds of chickens for meat birds that you want to get, just better for eating, grow faster, get chunkier. And then there are better egg layers that lay more eggs. They're a little more hardy for egg laying. Anyway, I primarily have egg layers. You can eat any chicken though, and I can make more chickens. So my egg laying chickens could turn into meat chickens if I needed to, because I do have some roosters and I do have some hens and I do have incubators, and there's, again, trying not to get too into the weeds, but chickens are great. Chickens are not hard. Chickens are very easy. Chickens are one of those things, and rabbits as well, but rabbits you don't get eggs from. I eat a lot of eggs. Eggs are one of the most perfect sources of nutrients on the planet. So eggs are amazing, and if you can get eggs into your diet, eggs are kind of hard. They're kind of expensive to, again, talking more about, I freeze dry my own raw eggs that I can use for baking or cooking or whatever, but eggs are amazing. I think if everyone had chickens, man, that would be amazing. And most even neighborhoods, even HOA neighborhoods, like apartments, it becomes kind of hard and stuff, obviously. But even if you live in the city, you're like, I live in the city, I can't have you might be able to have chickens. You might not be able to have roosters. There's probably like a limit of chickens that you can have. There will be some regulations around it depending on where you live, but I've talked to a lot of people in neighborhoods that are like highly HOA regulated, and they can still have chickens. So chickens are something definitely worth looking into. Rabbits, like I said, they don't lay eggs. Chickens are a little more versatile. Rabbits are easier in some ways, and you eat them. They're meat, obviously, and they're very lean meat, so they're not super fatty. So if you just, I don't know enough about it, but apparently if you had no other food sources and you just tried to live on rabbit meat, eventually you would die because it doesn't have enough fat or something. But anyway, rabbits, chickens. Now we're getting into more kind of like ranching, farming stuff when we're talking about cows and pigs and all these other types of animals that you could also raise. Goats are another popular one, especially for milk. Milk, if you can have milk, I am working to the point of goats and or cows. I like milk, we like cheese, we like yogurts and Greek yogurts, we like all these things. You can do all that with milk. So if you can eventually get up to goats or cows, that is super cool. But for most people, a lot of people, again, outside of apartments and stuff, chickens are not bad. Maybe you could have like one pet chicken in an apartment. I bet you could, and then you get virtually an egg a day. You probably want, a couple chickens. They get bored, unless they're, I don't know. This isn't a video about chickens. I like chickens though. But you might be able to have one chicken in an apartment. So growing your own food, from gardens to meats to eggs, there's a lot of options. And then you take your maybe 1 month of supply and you stretch that further, depending on what you can grow and what you can store. Learn how to store. There's a lot of ways to store. Glassing them, freeze drying them is the best. Food as well. You can freeze dry stuff from your garden. I had a huge harvest of tomatoes and I'm not going to be able to eat them in time. Freeze them, can them, freeze dry them. There's a lot of ways to basically make your whatever fall harvest last through winter and spring until you have the next year's harvest. So growing your own food, clutch. And in addition to that, again, depending on where you live, it may be plentiful or limited, but foraging food. I have this book, Foraging Food in the Rockies, that tells you all of the edible stuff from different forms of prickly pears to pine needle tea to mushroom. There's a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily think of that, oh, well, if I really needed to, I could eat that. Or like the pine needle tea. I don't do that regularly, but that's like a source of vitamin C and other nutrients that maybe you're not getting from your rice that you have stored. So you're like, well, I got tons of pine needles and some nuts and berries, and there's all kinds of things you can eat. Seeds. So learn to forage. If you live somewhere, again, where there's just naturally freaking mango trees out in the forest, you're lucky. Okay, so let's talk kind of traditionally, when you click this video, probably what you thought of is what I'm gonna talk about now, and that is just long-term, set it and forget it. What can I just buy today, tuck away, not think about, not have to worry about cycling in my shelves or stuff. I just want to like drop whatever, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, and just set myself up for disaster. Well, there's tons of companies out there that'll sell you buckets of food and number 10 cans. And I'm not poo-pooing on them. I have a ton of them myself. So I like a lot of these things. The number 10 cans. There's Augustin Farm. This is cheese blend powder. I got shredded cheese. I got ground beef. I bought a bunch of stuff. This is Mountain House. Now these are just meals. It's nice. It shows you the nutrient content, the calories, all that stuff on the side. And I bought these. I don't know when the manufacturing date is. I don't know if I can tell, but I've had these for years, and this thing expires in 2046. Now, a lot of people will tell you freeze-dried stuff lasts 25 years. Again, fat content, if something is super fatty, it won't last as long. That's why a lot of times freeze-dried, you'll find non-fat milk. Freeze-dried non-fat milk, I believe, will last longer than like full-fat freeze-dried milk. So the fattier it is, typically kind of the lower the shelf life. But some people say freeze-dried food will really last your life. So they have these. They have the 72-hour kits. I think I have some affiliate links with like Patriot Pantry Supply and stuff like that. Again, I'll put links down below. But these types of things are traditionally thought of as like, or they're in buckets or whatever. I'm just gonna buy it and forget about it. Usually that food's not very good. Peak Refuel, they are a sponsor of the channel, full disclosure. But if you've tried Peak, you know that they're freaking delicious. Now, are you gonna buy a year's supply of Peak Refuel? If you're balling out of control, maybe, because it's expensive. This Peak, I've talked to them about their shelf. Some people ask me about their shelf, like, oh, why isn't it as long as other freeze-dried food? It's freeze-dried. It's better freeze-dried food. It's higher quality. They're one of the, I don't know if I can talk about it. I won't talk about it. Very good freeze-dried food. Their shelf life, they just don't want to advertise. They don't want to fall into kind of the prepper marketing, maybe. I'm not sure. But just so you know, Peak freeze-dried food lasts as long as the other freeze-dried food. But it's more expensive, and it only comes in bags as of this video anyway. So how I take like this type, if you want a really good food approach, say we're thinking about it in terms of bagged food, you're like, I like to backpack, or I like to camp, and I like to bring this. And just like maybe I'll work up to getting a year's supply of protein, instead of just going to the sporting goods store and buying a Peak before a trip, I'll work up to where I can buy 10 Peaks or 20 Peaks or whatever. Because again, these have a really, really long shelf life. We'll say 25 years. And if you eat them regularly, you can have 100 of these bags eventually, and you're gonna eat them before they go bad in the day-to-day. So if it's something like this and you're like, I know that I will eat 100 of those in the next 10 years, and I can afford to buy 100 of them now, you could buy 100 of them now, and this is a great food source. Now, when it comes to these or the canned foods even, or anything of that nature, in the end of the world, if say the scenario is a apocalypse, right? Skynet took over, or China hacked the whole country, and we're gonna be out for years. That scenario, I wouldn't just open and eat a bag of this. I would stretch it. I would add a bunch of rice and a bunch of beans and a little bit of the, this, if I had 10 people in my house in the end of the world, we would treat ourselves to one bag mixed with a bunch of rice and beans. So that's how you stretch this to last longer. That is what I would do. That is what any intelligent person would do, unless you only have this. But you're really gonna want a more well-rounded kind of supply. So if you have eggs, if you have a garden, you have a Peak, then you mix all of that together and have a very yummy meal, kind of this as the base, this given the seasoning and all of that stuff. So great to have. I love these. If I could have 2 years supply of Peak refuel, I freaking would, because I would be praying for the end of the world. I'd be like, I don't know. Anyway, that is a good method of storage. When we're talking about long term, everyone thinks about rice and beans, like I've talked about earlier in the video. Rice and beans is good. What people don't know, I think, is that if you just buy rice, this is the rice I like to get. If you have Costco's great. This is from, I got a lot of my food storage preps are from Costco. This is enriched long grain white rice. Brown rice doesn't last as long, not nearly as long because of the oils. Quinoa doesn't last as long. A lot of the other things that are like rice, white rice lasts the longest, but it won't last the longest if you just leave it in this bag. It will have, again, oxygen can get in, moisture can get in, light can get in. If it's just in this bag, it's not going to last 25 years, probably. Now, if you store it, put this and then you put it in a bucket and then maybe. But if you just have this bag on the shelf in your pantry, it's not going to last 25 years. Does that matter to you? I don't know. Maybe not. So when you buy this is another thing I like to buy. If we're talking dollar per calorie, rice is one of the best, if not the best, as far as your money is going to buy a lot of calories. At the end of the day, you need calories. Are you going to try and balance your macros perfectly in the end of the world? You're not. I don't even do that now. In the end of the world, you're definitely not. You're going for calories. So calorie per dollar, especially if you're on a budget, very important. This is another high calorie per dollar. Get a little variety into your diet. These are rolled oats. You could grind these into oat flour if you wanted to, and then you can do a lot of stuff. Flour lasts a long time. It doesn't last as long as oats. If you buy like the wheat berries, they last longer than flour. But flour is another, flour, baking soda, these things that are kind of ingredients that you can use to make other things, breads and whatnot. Especially if you got chickens and you add eggs, you can do a lot. But oats are another easy food source, decent in calories, have some nutrients. Technically, you can grind them down and you make flour. It'll be different than the flour you buy at the store, but you can still do stuff with it. This bag, I think this is 25 pounds of rice, under 20 bucks. You may find comparable deals at your grocery store, Sam's Club, things like that, obviously. This, I think, is by far the best, and they may have, I don't go to Sam's Club. They may have something similar at Sam's Club, but this is a 10-pound bag of rolled oats for, I believe it's $7. $7 for a 10-pound bag of oats is killer. But for either of these, the oats or the rice, if you're eating them regularly, sweet. Just get them and eat them. There's higher quality oats. I eat oats. Again, not getting into like, oh, you shouldn't eat oats or you shouldn't eat nuts or seed oil. Yeah, like this video is not about that. I do eat some oats. I get like organic Whole Foods oats that I'm eating regularly. Am I gonna food prep that for just tuck away on the shelf for the end of times? No, in the end of times, I don't need to eat organic oats. I'm gonna eat the $6 oats or whatever. Tons of people eat this stuff every day. I would eat it every day. I'm not poo-pooing on the oats, but when it comes to long-term, I'm not getting the Gucciest products to store away for long-term. So rice, beans as well, everything that you buy is gonna be stored better in Mylar bags. Mylar is my go-to. You buy these in different sizes, depending on what you want to do. This is like I think it's a 5-gallon. Once this is much bigger, and you see it's like vacuumed tight here. That was not done with a vacuum sealer. That was done with an oxygen absorber. So Mylar bags, you can get them. These are the ones that Harvest Right sells. So this is, we made a bunch of shredded chicken. We had some chicken that was taking up freezer space, and I was like, let's make a huge pile of shredded chicken and freeze dry it. So this is shredded chicken from the freeze dryer. These are raw eggs for the freeze dryer. So freeze drying by itself basically gets all of the moisture out. I'll talk about freeze drying in a little bit. I'm talking about Mylar bags right now. So those are Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. I'll link this below. I'll link the ones I like. This is a good size here. When you get into something, depending on what you're freeze drying, you see I have the chickens and the eggs and stuff in smaller freeze dried bags, because once it is then exposed back to oxygen and moisture and light, the shelf life will start going down again. So stuff that inherently has a long shelf life, my rices and my beans and my oats, I don't mind putting in huge bags, because once I open that bag, it's still gonna be good for a while. But my chicken and stuff, I don't want a giant, huge bag of chicken, because once I open that, it's gonna start going bad once it's exposed to, once moisture starts getting in and oxygen starts getting in. So stuff that won't last a long time, you usually wanna use smaller Mylar bags. Stuff that will last a long time, use bigger Mylar bags. So basically you get a bag like this, you open it, you pour your contents in, you get oxygen absorbers. Again, I'll link to all this stuff down below. You seal it. These ones have zippers. I like the ones with zippers that also have seals. Then you seal it with heat. It's a heat seal mechanism. You can use a hair straightener. I have one of these press sealers that I use. It's a lot easier, and I do enough of it. Put the stuff in a Mylar bag, and then I try to label. I don't know if you can tell with the lighting and the reflectivity, but I like to label it. So this one says white rice, 12.5 pounds, 624. That is the day that I packaged it. I know how long rice is gonna last. If you have an idea of expiration and you wanna put an expiration date on there, you can. I just put the package date because I know, again, I know how all this stuff works. And then I put the calories as well. you could put all the nutrition facts. I do kind of store the, like, one extra bag of this stuff. So like the bag I just showed you with this, so I just have the nutrition facts on it if I'm curious. But at a minimum, I want to know how many calories there are in the thing. So on the Mylar bags, I usually write what it is, how much of it there is, the date I packaged it, and then the amount of calories in the total bag. If you wanted to get into servings and stuff, whatever, but serving sizes are gonna be different if you're basically starving. So that's not as important to me. And then there are other things that you'd wanna pack for, like I mentioned earlier, honey, but just eating rice and beans is gonna be very boring. It's gonna be bad for your psyche, and you're gonna not get a lot of trace nutrients. So you wanna add some variety into it. So long shelf life stuff like honey is amazing. Salt has an indefinite shelf life, but again, you're gonna kind of wanna store salt. So I have a lot of salt and sugars and stuff stored like this that I just took from the regular container, poured into bags, and now it's good forever. I've been buying some salt. This is salt, giant thing of salt I got on Amazon. That's kind of in a sealed container already. I bet it'll have pretty good shelf life just right here. This is 8,333 servings per container of salt. So quite a few servings, a big old thing of salt. Salt is a preservative. Salt is good on food. That salt has a ton of uses. I'm not getting into, this is not a video on salt, but salt is good to store. And certain salt you can buy and it's kind of stored, it's stored pretty good already. That's gonna have a long shelf life. So in addition to salt, like I was talking about, is seasoning. So if, you know, you have taco night 3 nights a week and you go through a ton of taco seasoning, you could buy a bunch of this, like the protein powder, keep it on the shelf. You know you're gonna use it eventually. I've bought some of these big, these are big sealed containers. I don't know the shelf life of this stuff. Most seasoning is gonna have a shelf life, again, if stored properly. So you can buy huge, this is kind of set it on the shelf and forget it, seasonings like that as well, which would be good to throw into the mix. And then let's talk about freeze dryer. Before this video, I've been freeze drying a bunch of stuff. Like I said, Harvest Right sent me out a freeze dryer. Full disclosure, they didn't pay me anything, but I do have an affiliate code. So if you'd like to buy a freeze dryer, they're expensive. They're a couple grand. So it's not a joke buying a freeze dryer. But if I were to say, if there is any singular tool that is gonna take your food preparedness to the next level, it is a freeze dryer. Now I'm talking prepper food preparedness, but also, even more applicable, if you have chickens, if you like to garden, if you like to grow things, if you like to make your own things, smoothies, anything, powders, whatever, and you really want to know where all of those nutrients, I want to make my own green powder mix. You need to know where all that's coming from. If you care about that, freeze dryer is the way to go. All of this stuff, all of those supplements and stuff, they're all freeze dried, put into little, well, either just you scoop it out or you put it into a pill. That's all freeze dried. You can make your own of pretty much all that stuff if you wanted to, if you were concerned about it. So freeze dryer, super versatile tool and great for food storage. Now I'm talking about eggs, I'm talking about gardening. A lot of times if you garden big, you have a big harvest and you pick it all at once, it's gonna go bad before you can eat it. So there are different ways to do it. You can freeze, you can dehydrate, but freeze drying keeps the highest nutrient content. It's very easy to rehydrate and use again, and it has the longest shelf life. So freeze drying is better than canning, freeze drying is better than dehydrating, freeze drying is better than freezing because of the nutrient content. And then also the ability to store it. When you can something, it's in can, it's heavy, it's with water, it's in a fragile glass jar. When you freeze dry it, it's very light. You can't break it, and you could put this you could make a big box. I like the Costco bins. I put A lot of my stuff, people love putting them in 5-gallon buckets. 5-gallon buckets kind of get expensive. You can get them for free sometimes if you go to your local bakery or whatever, pickle, they got stuff and they're throwing them or recycle. Sometimes you can get them for free, but I like the Costco bin, the cheap, like $7 or $8 big Costco bins. I have a bunch of those kind of labeled, and I put all, I got one for rice, one for oats, one for whatever. These things are light. They can just go in a bin. They could just go on the shelf as is, but I like to kind of put things in bins. Freeze drying is amazing. So what can you do with a freeze dryer? You can do a lot with a freeze dryer. As it pertains to gardening and eggs and stuff, you can freeze dry stuff that you're not going to eat and then use that through the rest of the year, through winter, and literally for the rest of your life. So one thing that I've been doing a lot of, if you have eggs, especially if you have chickens, especially if you have if you have a dozen chickens, you ain't eating all those eggs. Nobody's eating that many eggs. So what do? You could sell them. If you have that much production, you could sell them. That's great. Sell them. You give them to friends and family. I do that as well. But usually I still have more eggs. I've been freeze drying the eggs. Eggs are pretty expensive to buy freeze dried. If you do them yourself, you have them forever. Now I freeze dry the raw eggs. Raw eggs reconstitute. They're still raw. And then you cook them. You can freeze dry already cooked eggs, but they're not as good. You freeze dry raw eggs, you basically just add water to them, turns them into normal eggs, and then you cook those eggs. They're basically like eggs, like fresh eggs. When you eat freeze dried and then reconstitute already cooked eggs, they're not as good. So raw eggs, but then also you can reconstitute the raw eggs and then you can make bread or whatever. You have raw eggs, and that's much more flexible what you can do with the raw eggs. So freeze dry raw eggs. Like I said, maybe there was a sale on chicken. Maybe you got a bunch of chicken. Maybe you got a bunch of ground beef. You got stuff. Maybe you're a hunter. You filled up your freezer. You didn't get through it. What's wrong with you? You should get through it. But then or it was just a huge year and you got a ton of stuff. And you're like, well, I got all this extra meat. You freeze dry that meat. Freeze dry the meat. We freeze dried some chicken recently. That's just like I did some ground beef as well. Cook it. For the meats, I usually cook it and then freeze dry it. And then literally freeze dried, yeah, you can boil water and put it in a bag. If you've ever made a mountain house or a peak refuel or whatever, you kind of know how it goes. But you could just eat it raw. If you freeze dry vegetables, you could just eat it. I could just eat this chicken. Raw eggs are different. I eat raw eggs, but not everyone wants to. But you could just put the chicken in your mouth and eat it. You don't need to boil water and do all this stuff. You can just put non-boiling water and that turns it into normal chicken. Or for almost all freeze-dried stuff, you can just eat it raw, like freeze-dried snacks. Freeze-dried Skittles are delicious. So you can make snacks and stuff, obviously. And another great thing is you can use leftovers. You have a bunch of leftovers in the freezer. You're not going to eat them. Oh, that'd be great for preparedness food. Freeze dry the leftovers. Or if you have specific food requirements or you just hate Mountain House or whatever, and you want to make your own, you could just make your own meal, freeze dry it, and that's backpacking food as well. So tons of uses for a freeze dryer. Again, they did send me it. They're not paying me to say any of this stuff. I'm just a big, big fan of the freeze dryers. And in the freeze dried world, there's basically just Harvest Right. Harvest Right's basically the only company that really makes them. They were the original. They were kind of the inventor of them. I talked to the Harvest Right guy. Awesome history. But freeze dryer, amazing. Get a freeze dryer. You'll never, again, it's expensive. Save up for it, whatever. Maybe budget it for a year out. Or if you got the money for it and you get it and you got the practical applications for it, sweet. They are pretty big. They are pretty loud. So it's not something that you can just put out on the counter in your kitchen unless you're just using it very infrequently. But it's like a 24 to 48 hour freeze drying process sometimes, depending on what it is. The higher the water content, you freeze it ahead of time, and that makes the freeze dry. This video is not about freeze drying, but it is big, it is heavy, it is loud, so you'll probably not want it in the living room or in the kitchen because it runs for a long time. It's pretty loud. It's pretty big. So think about that beforehand. Have a place for it. Mine is in my basement, kind of out of the way, and then I can just let it run. But it's been the sickest thing for food preparedness that I've ever had. Okay. I'm not going to give away too many secrets, but if you have a Mormon friend, ask them about food storage. Well, not everyone knows this, but I don't know. I'm going to try and not offend anyone, but Mormons are supposed to have a couple years supply of food storage in their basements. That's kind of, I'm not a Mormon. I love Mormons. I have some Mormon friends. They know about food storage. They might have some resources that they might be willing to share with you. I don't want to give away the resources that I was shared though. So if you have a Mormon friend, ask them and maybe they can help you out. Maybe they'll just be willing to help you out with some food storage stuff. They have tools, they have supplies, they have resources available to you. Cool. And then the last thing I just wanted to briefly touch on is you got all this food. If you're preparing for a grid outage or a natural disaster or something where you're not going to have power, you're not going to have a normal way to make it, you're going to need water for almost all of this food. I'm going to do a separate dedicated video, Prepping 101 video on water, because it's like food, it's a bigger topic than you're just like water. That's a 1-minute video. There's a lot to it. So you'll need water. Maybe it's out of order. Maybe I should have done the water video first. Anyway, you need water, and then typically you'll need, at a minimum, a way to boil water. If you're gonna make rice, beans take a lot of work to make. Rice is much easier. Oats, super easy. Freeze dry, again, depending on what you're cooking, you're gonna need to either cook. Maybe you packed away a bunch of steaks. You're gonna need to cook them. So whether that's a like twig-powered rocket stove or a BioLite type thing, or you have a huge tank of propane that'll run out eventually to run your gas grill, or maybe you have solar and battery and an induction cooktop. Whatever it is, think about how you're gonna actually prepare this in a grid down. If you're prepping for a grid down scenario, think about how you're going to prepare this in a grid down scenario with ideally a limitless supply of fuel. Again, that's harder if you live in the city or the suburbs even to get that fuel storage. I'm in the mountains. For me personally, I have several rocket stoves. I have an unlimited supply of twigs and wood and things that I can burn. So that is kind of my primary. I have a few big 100-gallon tanks of propane. I do have natural gas as well, but that will eventually quit flowing. And I have some big propane tanks, but in like long term, it's gonna be a few rocket stoves that I have. Probably they're gonna be cooking most of my food. They also have solar ovens, which I'm pretty sure I bought one. I've never used one, but I'm pretty sure I bought one. If not, solar oven is another one, just harnesses the power of the sun to cook something in a little tube sometimes, or a little tray or a little dish. So a way to prepare the food. So store the food, prepare the food. Hopefully it's helped. I know it was a little bit random. It was just, I tried to think about how to put this video in a very like linear breakup, and it was harder than you might think. So that's why I was kind of hodgepodge together. I did have some notes again that I was referring to, so I tried to touch on everything that needed touching on. Cool. Well, hope you liked the video. Hopefully it was helpful to you. If you'd like to see more content like this, definitely, absolutely spend the time, sign into your YouTube account and comment. Comment on the video and let me know, because I want to know what you guys want to watch. Sweet. All right. Well, appreciate you watching. Until next time, guys. Take care.